All right, Texans improved to 7-5. The wild card picture doesn't change as much as we would have hoped. Our AFC foes that could have helped us out didn't necessarily. But CJ Stroud, shaky start to the beginning of this game, and then he got more and more comfortable. Some good things out of the offense, even though they only scored 20 points. I have only watched scant parts of a few of these answers, so I'm going to listen to all 9 answers I have here, and I know that the questions weren't audible in the press conference, so hopefully that helps some of you guys out. First question was first game back after 3 weeks, and you all are on a win streak, and there is pressure. What was the feeling like before this game coming into it for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, that little thought in the back of your mind, like division opponent. It's a big win, big time game, good opponent. So, I just think in those moments, that's all week, but it's just your preparation, how you prepare. So, I thought, as a team, we prepared the right way, we practiced the right way. So, I think we went out there, execute at a high level. There's a lot of things we can clean up, but I thought for the most part we moved the ball, pretty well, and punched the ball in the end zone, twice there, and then getting good field goals and timely drives, I think was a good thing. So all that goes to the preparation.
Yeah, I think in general, a lot of the sloppiness in the first half was partly CJ being a little bit off. That interception was pretty bad, but it wasn't a bad read. It was just a bad throw. But the procedural issues were just maddening. When they got down into the red zone and they had some penalties as well, that felt a whole lot like the first few weeks of the Texans season. I was starting to get nervous. There were good things to come, but it was more than just QB rust. After a week where they had a little bit of extra preparation, they had the Monday practice. That was disappointing, and hopefully we'll clean some of that up. The game management we'll get into when I think he answers a question about Nick Caley and obviously D'Amico with some of the questionable game management decisions. By and large, doesn't matter because they got the win. They've gone 7-2 after starting out 0-3. What does a win like this signify for the Houston Texans?
I think it shows how we're three-phase team where our special teams is really good, defense is really good, offense is really good, and when one lacks, the other pick us up, and I just think it's super dope that we're able to encourage one another, good play, bad play, and then move on and see guys still make plays after things happen. So and I'm just super proud of these guys, and we got to just keep it rolling.
There's one thing about that sometimes I get a little cynical when people talk like this, but I feel like it's appropriate. There's such a thing as sometimes just winning the box score, winning the stats that matter in terms of time of possession and those things. Going back to the Kubiak days, sometimes in a bad Kubiak season, I would kind of complain about the fact that, great, they're winning the box score, they're winning time of possession, they're winning yards per carry, all those things, but they lost the game. When it actually factors into a win, and the biggest thing, and they mentioned this on the broadcast a couple times, by the end of the game, the Texans had run 71 plays, the Colts had run 51. And there is an element to, man, a lot of the old cliches about running and then the running game starting to take hold in the second half as the defense wears down. That's not always necessarily as much about the physical battering you take in the run game, but it's the total numbers of plays that you play and the drives that you sustain. So time of possession today, the Texans won basically 35 minutes to 25 minutes. They won the total number of plays. You could see the fatigue starting to take hold with the Colts. Texans were 6 for 13 on third down. Colts were 3 for 10 on third down. And the defense we can talk about, as the week goes on. I mean, they held the Colts to 16 points. That's the fewest points they've had all season long. Texans had 24 first downs. Colts had 17. So even though you'd like the Texans to score more than 20 points with, like Oodles more than 20 points with more regularity, they controlled a lot of the physical elements of that game, and that was good to see. Next question. Where did all of my little notes go? You sons of bitches. Oh. Looks like Sether's X'd out of something. Hold on one second here. Okay. So like that part of it, and then CJ, I think, starting to control things more as the game went along, and he got rid of some of that discomfort that he had. I mean, early on, He looked uncomfortable. I thought in the pocket at times he looked like he was consciously forcing himself to stick in the pocket. He had a little bit of that element of dropping out the back of the pocket and making a couple of the pressures worse than they had to be. But it got better as the game went along. Next question. During this stretch of wins, do you feel like the offense has gotten better? And if so, what's been the catalyst for that?
Yeah, I definitely think the offense as a whole we gotten better. We found our identity, I feel. And I think, we're starting to play well together. It's a lot of new guys playing together this year. So we're starting to get that chemistry down and that connection. And you can see it, playing and play out, and route detail and, play calls and me getting to play in, organization of the, formations and everything like that. So I think, we're doing a better job at that. And then, the execution has picked up.
Yeah, I like, again, that first quarter was so horrendous as far as execution of the formations and everything. I felt like this was a good, you know what, I'm going to have to do a football 101 on what it means when a tight end or an offensive lineman is covered up or a tight end is covered up or uncovered, because the Texans committed both a covered and an uncovered procedural error. There was another procedural issue. They came very, very close to having a delay of game at one point, and as we know, they let the clock click down to 0. And then a beat or two beyond that. And the Texans got the benefit of the doubt on that one, on what was really a poorly officiated game in a lot of ways. So I do think that they have improved on that part of the execution of the offense in general. It was a really rough start to the game today. Next question, can you talk about the performance from Woody Marks, especially with him suffering that foot injury early, being able to come back into the game and give you all that extra push?
Yeah, Woody's a dog, man. I just, it's an honor to play with him, a blessing. And, I just, very happy, that he's on my team. And, I thought, our O-line did a really good job putting a hat on a hat and moving guys. And, Woody, Chubb did a really good job. So, it really starts with the run game. We got to be able to control the line of scrimmage and be able to run the ball. So I thought they did a good job at that.
All right, look, I know some of you have seen this already, but I'm just going to have to go find this again and show it, because the 16-yard run that Woody Marks had was awesome, but the one that here we go. Let's see. I'm just going to show this Ed Ingram part of it. I can't watch this enough. So this was from the end zone view, just a part of that 16-yard play by Woody Marks. Watch Ed Ingram. I mean, oh my God, that was beautiful. And it was a really nice run by Woody Marks. This is one where he kind of juked himself at the end of it, but watch him. Remember last year how slanting defensive linemen were a big issue? We watch the right guard here, Ed Ingram. Defensive tackle slants inside. And goodness gracious, they handle it the right way. Linebackers are fast flowing by the Colts, and Ed Ingram comes up on the backer and just, gosh, that is just beautiful. Also, again, looking at slanting defensive linemen, look at the left guard, Titus Howard. He starts off on the zone run to his right. Defensive tackle disappears, and he just wheels and seals him off. It was just a beautiful job. And, honestly, the cohesion by the offensive line this year has steadily improved. This lineup that they have right now with Titus Howard at left guard and Trent Brown at right tackle, this is what I would imagine they'll stick with. The pass protection in the last couple of weeks, they've allowed 2 sacks in 2 games, and it's been largely pretty solid. Some of those times today, and they talked about this on the broadcast, and it was obvious. There were times where CJ had a clean pocket, but it was a compressed pocket, and that was when he still looked pretty uncomfortable in the first half. But the protection, by and large, it was really hard to find anything to complain about. Let's see. What do you feel like it took to get that first down and close it out the way you all did offensively at the end of the game? And Woody Marks, credit to him on that play as well. Woody Marks, he had a few plays today where he ground out yardage for extra yards, including that first down where he was just a bullet at the end of that play and got 4 yards on his own.
I think, the way, Kale's called it, with play action, with, us being able to run the ball early downs, in previous drives. And I think, that just opens up the floodgates for that last drive. And then, the toughness we have up front, with Jake, Ed, Big Trent, Ty, and Tay, our tight ends putting their hats in there. So I thought, and then, Woody taking care of what he has to do, take care of the ball, pushing forward, and our receivers as well. So, just all 11 guys, doing their job at the best of their ability and, trying to just, ice the game. And, it's always fun to do that.
The receiving blocking was really good today, especially on those plays to the perimeter. Both the Nico Collins touchdown run and the Nick Chubb touchdown run. You had Dalton Schultz, tight ends included in this. Dalton Schultz, Xavier Hutchinson, Cade Stover. They were really good there out on the edge. I haven't gone back and watched the all 22 of all the other run plays. They had some negative run plays today, obviously, but their ability, I think really where I'm most encouraged is just how much better they are fundamentally. And I credit to Cole Popovich, credit to Nick Caley for that element of it, that even though they're not a potent rushing attack right now, they're forming a solid wall. They're handling slanting defensive linemen. They're picking up games. They're doing all those things that really eluded them the last couple years. Well, to be fair, the last 4 years, but this, these past 2 years since D'Amico took over, that's been the most frustrating thing to watch is some of the poor fundamentals. And fundamentally, they're just a better football team right now along the offensive line, and then with their run blocking in general, with the skill position players and everybody else. Next question: how do you think you played in your first game back?
I would say, early on I was a little rusty. I thought, they really didn't give me big plays. Like they were taking a lot of that stuff away. So I thought I was very disciplined. Check downs and getting the ball to where it had to go. And then of course the interception sucked. I got to just take care of the ball and put Hutch in a better spot and just flatten him out. But other than that, I thought I played really good. I thought every opportunity I had, with the ball, I thought I made the right decision. A couple plays I want back. But I thought, I did a really good job of, taking what the defense was giving me. I think the type of team we have, I don't have to be Superman all the time. And, I got to just do my job each and every play. And I'm not going to be perfect. I'm never going to be perfect. And I trust myself. I know my teammates trust me. And that's all that really matters.
The one play that he made to Dalton Schultz, he threw to Dalton Schultz when he was under pressure, where it looked like he was going to try to bail out of the pocket, and then he stepped up into the pocket and found Dalton Schultz. That was beautiful. I thought early on, again, as he said, he was rusty. I think as the game went on, he got better and better at figuring out when to take the easy money, when to push it downfield. I thought he tried to force it a little bit early on. Didn't look like he had quite the same touch on his throws that we've come accustomed to, but that all got better. So I know it's only 3 weeks, but it's 3 weeks plus a concussion and all that time back. This is about as efficient as I could have, obviously it could have been better, but he was 22 for 35 for 276 yards, 7.9 yards per attempt, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, and only taking the 2 sacks is a big deal. If you're still into QBR or if you've boycotted it, 67.7 QBR, which is pretty damn good if you care about QBR. I understand if you've boycotted QBR. Next question. Early on in the year, we were talking about how you all weren't able to finish these games and not coming up on the right side of these one-score games. What have you all put together as far as on both sides of the ball to be able to get over the hump and win these types of games? I think this is where he calls themselves a three-phase team.
Yeah, I think winning on third down, being better on first and second down, and then, scoring touchdowns in the red zone is, that's really just the key to victory every week. If we want to win games, that's what we got to do. If we look back at some of those games, we were on the goal line in the red zone and not scoring touchdowns and settling for field goals, so, that's something that we just had to change, and I thought we've been able to do that the last couple of weeks. I thought, when Davis came in, he did a really good job at that. I thought the play calling, with the play and the routes we're doing has been great. Like we had the one today, guy knocked it down, but Dalton wide open, you know what I'm saying? So things like that will start, to come more and more evident, as we be able to run the ball down there and, be able to score touchdowns in the red zone is really key.
The touchdowns in the red zone. There's that minor detail that eluded us early in the season. That part of it, if we set aside for a moment the Cade Stover tush push, which I applaud them finally taking advantage of the rules that will likely be outlawed next season. Finally, they did it. As we know from reading about, listening to, watching the Eagles do this and do it so effectively, it takes more than just calling the play. It takes technique. It takes skill. And it's not something that that you can just assume that after you get stuffed one time, you're going to line up just like the Eagles or the Bills do and get it a second time. So that part of it, especially at that stage in the game when they got stuffed, I know looked on the third down like you might have gotten it, whatever. They got, for all intents and purposes, they got stuffed 2 plays in a row. That's as CJ was really starting to cook in the passing game. That was frustrating, but at the same time, I credit Kaylee for the deception and the ingenuity on the Nico Collins play. You know, they pulled the left guard. Titus Howard pulled to his right. All the linebackers bit on it as Nico Collins was coming around, created a whole bunch of clutter for guys that might have been coming in pursuit. And then they got a really good block from, I want to say it was Ursary and Cade Stover on that one. Unless that was the Nick Chubb one, whatever it was. Ursary had a good block on one of those runs to the left as well. That was good. Game management. The end of the first half frustrated me. You're going to play it conservatively to try to go for a field goal, I guess. You can still go with urgency. I thought they tried to get a little too cute in trying to prevent the Colts from having any chance to retaliate on that. But then at the end, going super aggressive and going for it on fourth down with the Cade Stover tush push. That part of it doesn't quite jibe. I wish they had a little bit more of an attack mentality all the time. If you're going to show it sometimes, and then maybe just a little bit more ingenuity. But I got to credit Kaylee for where they did have ingenuity today. Next question. Let's see. Does it take one play to get the rust knocked off?
Yeah, it takes a couple. You know, like you get a little windy, a little tired because you ain't been out there in a minute. But I thought the first drive, you know, we drove the ball down really good. Second drive, you know, we had some penalties. Got to fix that. You know, our formations and stuff. And then after the turnover, I just got to take care of the ball. Like that's plainly on me. I can't put my team in that position, and I got to be better there. But you know, I thought other than that, you know, I put the ball in the right positions, thought I was accurate. And, you know, I thought my O-line did a really good job of giving me opportunity, giving me time, you know, to sit in there and, you know, deal. So I thought route detail was great. Thought Hig played really good, and Nico and, you know, the rest of the guys. So we just got to keep rolling.
Yeah, and I don't know. Usually you'll say it takes one hit to get the rust knocked off. I was actually thinking about this early in the game. Yeah, on one of CJ's first scrambles. I'm like, I don't want him to take any hits today. I'd prefer him not to knock the rust off that way. As a lineman, sometimes you feel like you almost want to get your bell rung, which these days we know is probably a concussion. But whatever. It's nice to just get your bell rung a little bit to really get you into the flow of a game. For CJ, I think it just took a half of football. And it wasn't really a half. They had that touchdown drive was a nice drive. They had multiple big plays. They had the Woody Marks run on that first touchdown drive. They had a Nico Collins long pass. They had a Jaden Higgins long pass. So that was a nice drive. And even in the middle of that drive, they had at least one bad penalty. Remember early on, before the officials took over and started making bad calls against both teams, the Texans were 100% guilty of the penalties they were committing. The procedural issues, CJ Stroud throwing, I don't know what, a full 2 yards past the line of scrimmage. Those were legitimately rusty issues. He's watched games on television for 2 of the last 3 weeks, and he forgot that blue line is imaginary, and you can't see it on the field. Last question. You guys are now finding ways to close out these wins that slipped away earlier this year. What's changed, and how does this feel? How good does this feel playing your best as you try to close out the season? And then we'll take a look at the standings.
Yeah, like I just told them, it's just like, you know, scoring the red zone is key, you know, making 3, you know, 7. You know, and our defense has always held us up. So, like, you know, I don't know, they always will say, you know, they want to clean things up as well. But, like, as an offense, you know, I think that's the key is, like, if we want to win games in the NFL, you know, you got to score in the red zone, you know. And I thought these last couple of games, you know, our offense has been able to do that at a higher level. So, you know, and even like today, like, even not, like, having a touchdown, you know, it's not like super cool, but it's like we're driving the ball down, and then we're punching it in, and that's the best feeling in the world. So, as long as we're doing our job that way, and if it takes 40 plays or it takes 2, like it is what it is. So I think just being on our P's and Q's and executing at a high level is why you see a little bit of difference.
Okay, all right. You know how early? Yeah, thank you, CJ. Remember early? It seemed like, and then when I say early, I mean pretty much the entire time before CJ got his concussion. CJ would talk about the death by 1,000 cuts offense, and it felt a little bit like a hostage video when he was saying it. I can imagine how that feels when you're driving down the field and then you're not punching the ball in. That's frustrating. This is a little bit of proof in the pudding as they've started to succeed in the red zone, including when Davis Mills was at the helm these last couple of weeks, that, all right, look at this. We're driving down the field and then we're actually finishing the job. That matters, and I think in completely embracing the offense and then going back to those box score numbers, controlling the time of possession, running the ball, if not brilliantly, but at least effectively to get you into the proper down and distance situations. If we look at the game right now, and knowing that even if the Broncos somehow lose this game tonight, they're in a pretty lofty position. But if we look at the let me be sure my microphone's on here. Let me know if you guys can hear me or tell me that you can't. This is where we run into technical difficulties sometimes. All right. This is the playoff standings. Patriots, Broncos, Jaguars, Ravens. They all lead their divisions. And then we go down to – so the Jaguars, obviously, you're one game behind the Jaguars, and you don't control your own destiny with them. You do control your destiny with the Colts because you face them again. You control your fate in terms of how you stack up next to the Chargers because you play them again. You've already beat the Bills, and you're one game behind all those 8-4 teams. When you go down to the teams that are on the bubble, the Texans are first via all the tiebreakers at this time of year. They get kind of convoluted, but you got a one game lead over the Steelers, over the Chiefs. You face them next week. And then look at the Dolphins hanging in there at number 11. The Dolphins being 5-7, given some of their earlier season performances, is actually pretty damn impressive. I feel good. Look, they've put together a run that seemed really improbable when they were 0-3. I think CJ is going to continue to look better. Playing on the road against the Chiefs has been a little bit of an issue for this football team, whether it's in the playoffs or whether it involves playoff scenarios. So I'm trying not to think about all that right now. Trying not to think about the fact that Andy Reid, who's awesome after bye weeks, has himself a little bit of a mini bye week this week. And I'm trying to remember all the disappointing performances the Chiefs have had this year. But this is a good win. Ugly, sloppy at times versus on paper, the number one offense in the NFL. They've scored 20 or fewer points in 3 of their last 4 games. Do I have that correct? So they've not been the same offense as of late. And we'll talk about the defense maybe when we go over some film tomorrow. So thank you, everybody. Oh, let me get some comments real quick. I'm just going to hit a couple because Seth, as one of you asked, yes, I'm back on the radio tomorrow. I took Friday off this week after Thanksgiving. It's way too early to worry about CJ's contract. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about that right this moment. AFC North looks like poop this year. I'm not gonna argue with you on that one, my friend. The mic was good. Thank you guys for letting me know and not lying to me. The O-line is definitely getting better. Yeah, and it's happened so gradually. And I've fought it at times. I fought the acknowledgement that, wait a second, all right, look, part of it was that CJ and Davis have been getting rid of the ball real quickly. But I think that's going to continue to hopefully be a thing, and then selectively take your shots downfield. But as CJ and Davis made it easier on the offensive line by getting rid of the ball quickly, the offensive line was also improving, and they got healthy. Ariante Ursary has really been a revelation. Ed Ingram has been for whatever a mistake it was with the whole Cam Robinson scenario, Ed Ingram and Trent Brown so far have vastly made up for that. So we find ourselves wondering, is the narrative on Nick Caserio by the end of the season going to be different when it comes to the way he handles the offensive line? God, I hope so, because I cannot do any more of those segments on Sports Radio 610, which you should listen to at 6 a.m. Central tomorrow.